round of applause. Thanks for joining us today evening for what is going to be a stimulating and thoughtful discussion on a timely topic. I'm Shal Kumar. I'm the co-organizer of this event and MC. I spent over 5 years at UC Berkeley in administration. It's a pleasure to be here today again. Political landscape. Can the Aam Aadmi Party be a game changer in India? It is fitting that this thought-provoking topic on the Aam Aadmi Party is being hosted at UC Berkeley. UC Berkeley is one of the premier research universities in India, well, in the world. It has a long tradition of excellence, innovation, liberal thinking, and civic engagement. There are many reasons that make UC Berkeley special. One of the key reasons is its students. Bright, hardworking, intellectually curious, and engaged. Thus, it would not come as a surprise to you today that today's program is co-sponsored by Indian students and Asha for Education Berkeley. Coincidentally, Asha was born in UC Berkeley in 1991. Could all the volunteers here who helped bring this program together stand up? And there are two here. One is here. Let's give them a hand of applause. Asha for Education is a non-profit organization dedicated towards catalyzing socio-economic change in India through the provision of education to underprivileged children. Currently, Asha Berkeley funds a variety of projects that serves different populations, from the street children in Delhi to the children of migrant laborers in Madhya Pradesh to children of prostitutes in Uttar Pradesh. Now I'd like to invite two leaders of this organization to say a few words. Meghna Ishwarappa is the chapter coordinator and Sridevi Prasad is the project coordinator of Asha. Both are juniors at UC Berkeley and are majoring in molecular and cell biology. Meghna and Sridevi.
Thank you for the introduction. Thank you for the introduction. As he said, I'm Sridevi, this is Meghna. We are part of Asha for Education. Currently, we're supporting 6 projects, which we would like to tell you about.
So one of the projects is called the Avantika Vidya Bhavan. It's in Bhopal, Madhya Pradesh, and it helps provide education to the children of migrant day laborers. Another project is called Jangat, and it helps provide education and vocational skills to street children in Delhi. And yet another project is called Little Stars, and it's for children of the slums in Varanasi.
Our next 2 projects are Mer Sahara, which is in Uttar Pradesh. It also serves children of migrant laborers and day laborers. And our second last project is Udayan Care. Udayan Care is in Delhi, and this past summer we actually helped 50 girls attend a tuition center for their board exams. And then,
So every year we do a fundraiser. It's Asha Live. It's called Work an Hour. And what we do here is we ask donors to symbolically work an hour towards providing education by donating an hour reserved for their salary.
so this year Asha has nominated one of our biggest and longest running projects, Gudia. Gudia works in Varanasi and Mount Uttar Pradesh, primarily in the red light districts. Gudia seeks to end child prostitution and forced second-generation prostitution through the provision of education. Currently, we're looking to fundraise to build a new non-formal shelter in Mount Uttar Pradesh. If you'd like to help us, please come by our table. We're right there in the middle. We have flyers, want to learn more about what Asha does on campus, the events we hold, and the projects we support. Please come talk to either of us. Thank you.
Thanks Meghna and Sridevi. I commend you and Asha for the wonderful work that you do and the contributions you're making to the society. I would also like to acknowledge our community partners, the Center for South Asia Studies at UC Berkeley. I don't think their members are here, but I think some of the faculty members are here. So, a round of applause. It is time to start the panel discussion. After the panel discussion and question and answers with you, there will be book signing with Gurucharan. We have assembled a great panel. We have an India-based public intellectual who has been a successful corporate executive and now is a successful author and a respected thought leader. We have 2 Silicon Valley-based serial entrepreneurs. Both are leaders in various Indian professional organizations IITians, and are supporters of Aam Aadmi Party. And we have a world-renowned Sanskrit scholar who is also an expert in Vedic texts. I know the panelists personally and know that we can look forward to an engaging, insightful, and thoughtful discussion. It is my pleasure to introduce Professor Robert Goldman, who will moderate this session. He's a professor of Sanskrit and Catherine and William Magistretti, distinguished professor in South and Southeast Asian Studies at UC Berkeley. His areas of scholarly interest include Sanskrit literature and literary theory, Indian epic studies, and psychoanalytically oriented cultural studies. He's perhaps best known for his work as a director, journal editor, and principal translator of a massive and fully annotated translation of the critical edition of the Valmiki Ramayana. His work has been recognized by several awards and fellowships, including election as a Fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. Most recently, he has been honored by the President of India as the 2013 awardee of the President's Certificate of Honor for Sanskrit. He is a long-time resident of India, a keen observer in India's culture and society. A side note which might interest many of you, he has been studying and teaching Sanskrit for close to 50 years. Please welcome a friend of India and my friend, Professor Goldman.
Thank you for that very fulsome introduction, Chad, and I wish you had mentioned the 50-year part. But, I'd like to also thank Shao for his role in organizing this, and especially thank Asha for education and our very fine and activist students here at UC Berkeley, particularly Sridev and Meghna, whom we met earlier, and the other panelists here, whom I will be introducing. Several people have this afternoon tactfully asked me, what are you doing here? As a Sanskrit scholar involved in this, and I of course would come in any case because I'm quite interested in the subject today, but Sanskritists are particularly vulnerable to certain kinds of invitations and invocations, you might say. There's a kind of a proverb in Sanskrit that says, Gunana the bullet gets stuck in the yoke because of his particular vulnerability to that sort of thing. So this is what happens to Sanskritists in this situation. And I have also looked into some of the materials on governance, economics, corruption, which are not new issues. Certainly these are issues that have come to the fore over many decades in modern India, but particularly in the last several years with the rise of a very active ground level based anti-corruption movement, Anna Hazare and Mr. Kejriwal. And so in thinking about this, I wanted to look back and see that there is a long tradition of concern with forms of governance, with honesty in governance, that goes quite far back into antiquity. And I just wanted to mention in opening here, just two elements of that. Around an operative term that occurs in certain genres of Sanskrit literature, and that term is the term shuchi, which means honest, decent, clean, open, transparent. And its derivative term shaucha, that is honesty, integrity, applied specifically to agents of government. So we see it in two ways. One is a kind of models of governance that some of the most influential and pervasively circulated texts of the Indian tradition have left for us as their legacy. And I just wanted to read you a little bit of our translation of part of this. This is just a short passage. I'm going to read a few verses from the Valmiki Ramayana, since Shao kindly mentioned it. And what we're talking about is the idealized description of a cabinet of ministers And I'm not talking here specifically, since I mentioned Ramayana, I'm not talking about this Ram Rajya. You do not have to be God to run an honest government. So this is actually the cabinet of Dasharatha. He's just king, that is the leader of the state. The king had 8 renowned ministers, incorruptible and unswervingly devoted to affairs of state. Great and majestic, learned, steadfast, they were diligent and as good as their word. They had power, forbearance, and fame, and spoke with a smile. They would never utter a false word for sake of pleasure or profit. Adept at their duties, they were tested in loyalty, so that if the occasion demanded, they would punish even their own sons. Does it sound familiar in modernity? I don't think so. They were busy increasing the treasury and maintaining the army, and did not harm even a hostile man if he was innocent. They put into practice the science of statecraft. They were protectors of all honest inhabitants of the realm. They filled the treasury without injury to the people and meted out strict punishment only after considering the gravity of a person's offense. When those honest and like-minded men sat in judgment, there was no one in the city or the kingdom who dared bear false witness. With the eye of statecraft, they were vigilant on behalf of the welfare of the people. So this is kind of an idealized vision of how governance should be run, around the term shuchi, clean, honest, and open. And that's, of course, an idealized idea, but how did the tradition think you could actually bring those things about in the real world? And that's why we have, of course, the famous Arthashastra of the great minister Kautilya, who knew very well that it's difficult to maintain honesty when people are given power and access to resources. He quotes a rather lovely verse, Matsyayatam tashalile charanto natum nashakya salivam pipantaha yuktastata karya vidau viyukta natum nashakya danamadadana. Just as it's impossible to determine whether a fish swimming in the water is drinking that water, so in the same way, it's impossible to tell whether a government official is taking money out of the system. So what do you do about that? Well, he has a chapter on it. There's an app for that, you might say, right? This is what Kautilya calls Gura Jivinam Raksha, protection against people who have secret income, that is to say, are extorting money illegally from the system. And he says, well, the governor should determine the shaucha shaucham, the honesty or dishonesty of his appointed officials. And if he suspects, yachatra guda jivinam shanketa, if he should suspect someone is actually on the take, then he should investigate through the aid of a confidential agent. So Kautilya was very big on entrapment. He said you had these kind of undercover agents you would send out to investigate and ensure the honesty of officials. And here's just one example I give you before we get going. He says, Dharmastam Vishvasobhakatam Tantri Bruya. The secret agent, that is the undercover agent, should say to a judge or a judicial official whose loyalty he wishes to determine, whose honesty he wishes to determine. He says, I've got this brother-in-law who's got a legal case going on against him. Can you just make this go away? And here, please take this money. If he should do that, then he should be banished from the realm as a bribe taker. That is the way you run a government. So these are issues that were very much on the minds of people who thought about such issues as governance. There's no reason these could not be done in modernity. And I'm hopeful that the panel that we're going to have in the question and answer period can bring up some ideas for ground changing, as we put it today. So what we're going to do is I'm going to call on the 3 distinguished panelists today, and they will each give a brief statement, after which we will open up the floor to Q&A. Our first speaker, Mr. Abhay Bhushan, is a graduate of the Indian Institute of Technology, Kanpur, and a graduate of MIT. Incidentally, he's one of the first graduating classes from IIT Kanpur, so he has his special little IIT Kanpur 50th shirt on. Very nice. He's an internet pioneer, author of FTP, SF Bay Area entrepreneur, environmental and community activist. He's a co-founder of the Bay Area Action, now called Actera, and of Pun IIT. Abhay is the former president of Pun IIT USA, IIT Kanpur Alumni Association in the US, IIT Kanpur Foundation, and Indians for Collective Action. He's been supporting social and environmental activists in India and the USA for many, many decades, including the anti-corruption movement and Aam Aadmi Party. So please welcome.
Well, thank you, Professor Goldman. And it is great to be in Berkeley, the birthplace of the free speech movement. And I just want to start some personal connection. I first met Arvind Kejriwal in 2006 when India for Collective Action honored him for his work on right to information. This is the same organization that gave birth to Asha for Education in 1991. With Sandeep Pandey and Deepak Gupta, when they came and they wanted to do something for education in India, Indians for Collective Action was there. This is the organization that was started in Berkeley in 1968 with Professor P.K. Mehta and a bunch of other people, and it has just been doing a lot of good work. And so that was my first introduction to Arvind. And Arvind I found to be just a wonderful person. But my connection to Arvind also goes deeper because my first cousin and my uncle are deeply involved with Arvind in Aam Aadmi Party, Mr. Shanti Bhushan and Prashant Bhushan, who were there. And I spent, after 13 years in the US, I went back to India to work in the villages for a year. And Prashant was with me all through in Allahabad. And we went many times together and we had vigorous discussion. At that time, I was mentoring him. He was only 21, 22. And then, for the last 12 years, he's been mentoring me about problems of India and the extent of corruption and what can be done. And tirelessly he's been fighting, as those of you know, all the corrupt practices and things. He's a topmost lawyer, but he just spends all his time in public interest litigation and supporting the good for common people. So that's just a personal kind of an introduction. And then I want to talk about a little bit of Aam Aadmi Party. As those of you who are here, this kind of preaching of corruption is perhaps the single most important factor today. There's a root of most of India's problems, including the widespread poverty, the inadequate education, healthcare, threatening development, and the promising future of young India. The Aam Aadmi Party, or AAP, as I will call it now, has its roots in RTI, Right to Information, and the India Against Corruption, or IAC movement. The AAP leaders and IAC activists tried to change the system from outside. They soon realized that to bring good governance to India, they needed to be part of the democratic process. So the AAP strategy in fighting corruption is fourfold. First, an effective Lokpal bill, having both the authority and the independence to investigate and prosecute, with a mandate for prompt resolution of cases. And this is the problem with the current Indian thing. Yes, there is a business commissioner, but he doesn't have any authority. There are people within the department, but they don't have any independence. So there is nobody who is independent at the same time has authority to prosecute. And that is the main issue that Lokpal will solve. The second is good governance. Now, status quo by most people in India is unacceptable. The poor, the dispossessed, the unequal, and discriminated face the brunt of miseries that are there. And they can be set right by good governance. We need to change the rules of the game. It's not just changing just the players. The players have to be committed to changing the rules of the game. The present system parties that are there and parties will not make India a human, caring place where it was developed. Now, the third thing is use of laws and technology. The RTI was first thing that Arvind had spearheaded, the right to information. It gave people the power to find the information that is vital to finding what the government is doing. People could find where the government money is going. They could challenge. They could put some pressure, and things have changed. In fact, after Arvind did this thing, Larry Brilliant was there, and when we honored him, he said Arvind should be called Shri 210 because he had cut 400 piece in half. Okay, so, and it's really true, it has helped, but it has not quite gone. The corruption is growing even faster than any attempts to curb it. And you can go into the nature of it, but that's, I think maybe Pran or other speakers will cover it. And the decentralization of power, giving power to the people with checks and balances and accountability to public. So what Arvind has done in his time in Delhi, before, between the RDI and when the anti-corruption movement and the Aam Aadmi Party, he set up mohalla committees to look at and demand accountability from the government officials as to why their water was not working, why the electricity was expensive. He's still doing it with the Aam Aadmi Party, and he's been just a tireless worker for the interest of the poor. And so the 4 basic tenets of the Aam Aadmi Party is Swaraj, which is participative democracy and decentralized decision making. It can be called the second freedom struggle. First was from British, now is the struggle from our own avarices and our own systems that really are patterned after the British. I don't know if you know, the penal code that exists today in India is the same penal code that the British used to oppress India. The forest policy, the land policy, all the use policies are the same policies the British used. So what has changed? Only the color of the skin of the rulers have changed. In fact, British could be said they were less corrupt, perhaps. Okay? The Aam Aadmi first, that means the common man is the policy that drafted with the common person in mind, with the masses in mind, not just for the elite few, for the rich, but policies for all. There's zero tolerance for corruption, and the old divisive politics of caste, class, and religion. And this is the way, see, we used to say British is divided and rule. Have you heard British had the policy divide and rule, the Hindu against Muslims, and this class against that, Maharaja against this and that? The same thing is done by the existing political parties. So make no mistake, unless we change something, unless we have a fundamental change, we are compromising the future of a very young and bright India, which we have. We have the largest population of young people in the world. In fact, the young people in India outnumber the population of any other country except China. So the last one is the Constitution, which is the frame of reference for justice, equity, and diversity. Now, Constitution can be amended, just like the Bill of Rights, what they did for the US Constitution. Similar things have to be done with constitutional amendments to give some of the changes that are vitally needed. Now, AAP is not wedded to any ideology. It believes in the appropriate role for state and the market forces in removing poverty and in providing education, healthcare, security, utilities, services, and infrastructure. AAP is for privatization where it makes sense, and for an open process with public support that does not feed more corruption and protects the citizens. It is not a leftist ideology, but a very practical approach. For example, a priority for AAP is on K through 12 education for the masses who cannot afford expensive private schools. Now, the Parliament, some time ago, passed the Right to Education Bill. There's no funding for it, there's no monitoring for it. Half the money that's existing in Delhi goes in corruption. 5,000 schools are non-operating on paper alone. I have a personal experience. When I went to India and the villages, I asked where is the government school, because there were 3 government schools. There were none. They said, okay, where the teacher comes? The teacher comes under this tree. I waited 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. I went to the block development officer. He said, well, maybe he's ill, he's this. Finally, the teacher came. He said, please, excuse me, the students don't come. The student said, the teacher doesn't come. The teacher said, there's no building. The student said, where are you going to go? And these are non-functioning schools on paper, where a person gets salary, where money is expended for building, nobody knows where it goes, and they're trying to find through RTI and other means. This is just one example. AAP will make these 5,000 non-functioning schools become good schools in Delhi to compete with the best of private schools. When I came to US in 1965, I went there, I was surprised. My kids grew here. There was no tuition I had to pay, I didn't have to buy books, I didn't have to buy stationery, everything was provided by the state, and America is a capitalist country. And India, at that time, was a socialist country, which has nothing for anything to do with education for the masses. Everybody is sent to public school. I went to Delhi public school. It is a private school. The public school is different from parochial school, which is not a religious school, but there are no public schools like we see in the United States. And this is going to change and has to change. AAP will not privatize defense. I mean, volunteer army paid by mercenaries. AAP will not privatize police services or roads and airports. They are common to the people. It will not sell national wealth for pittance just because of corruption, making millions of people homeless in the name of development. This is happening today with the mining interest, with Elari mines. You must have heard of that scam. It's happening in Jharkhand. It has led to the Naxalite movement. When you throw millions and millions of people out of the land and think just because you get 4,000 crores, the chief who was really indicted of Jharkhand, the chief minister, he had amassed 4,000 crores in 2 years, selling these mining and moving the people out on the point of a gun. And when that didn't work, Salvajudam, private militia, got involved in it. So this is something that we need to check. The people need to be displaced and there will be compensation. There are reasons why they can be displaced, and they might be because of eminent domain and something needs to be done, but they should be adequately compensated. The people who are not by the dam, okay, and we can go in the merits of the dam or not the merits of the dam, they're never being compensated adequately. And these are things that are for people, the masses, because they are powerless. And I just want to kind of end on a little bit of our momentum, which is that India's political mood, as I've been reading and following, is changing rapidly. In a recent survey by our report in Outlook magazine, 47% are willing to give chance, compared to 33% of BJP and 27% for Congress. In the chief ministerial popular ranking in the poll, Arvind was on top with 38.5%, followed by Sheila Dixit with 18.5%, and the BJP candidate Vijay Goyal with 12.1%. Another poll showed that the vote share of 27% for AAP, 32% for BJP, and 26% for Congress. The public is giving 47% favorable reading to AAP compared to 31% unfavorable reading, but for BJP it's 32% favorable to 52% unfavorable. For Congress, it's slightly more favorable, 37%, but even more unfavorable, 62%. So the question is, people are saying, I'm going to want to vote because this party, I don't want to get BJP in. Okay? The people who are threatened minorities who feel that communal policies might be bad for them. Other people are saying, I want to throw the Congress out, so I'll vote for BJP even though I don't like them. Well, today, for the first time, the people in Delhi have a viable alternative. Arvind recently went to IIT Delhi, and on the spot, after a panel discussion, the 4 other panels, when he spoke, 450 IITians in the audience joined to be active volunteers for AAP. I mean, this reminds me of Berkeley, in the time of the anti-war days. And then the common people, the activists, Tehamka just reported there are over 100,000 unpaid foot soldier volunteers for AAP working in Delhi. And it is changing the game. So the question, there are people, auto rickshaws, who are without any money putting the AAP boards on their auto rickshaws. The government is cracking down on them. They said, you cannot have them. This is illegal. You can't have a political car. Other people are doing it all the time. So the Supreme Court, they went to Prashant Fadli case, they said, ruled in the favor, so they can have the thing. And there are all kinds of pressures involved. They put posters on people's houses, they were pulled down. So what they did is they put photographs of the person and Arvind Kejriwal on the posters and got them done. So they won't be taken out. I mean, this is just kind of, the amount of pressure. The was fighting against electricity, the electricity of the candidates was cut with 7 policemen going there and doing this. So the existing power structure is fighting hard, like the empire will strike back. Okay? But you want to make the change, like David and Goliath battle, Nirbal ki ladai balwan se. You have to have courage. And that's what Arvind says. I'm doing it with courage. Now, how many of you, let me have a show, saw the Satyagraha movie? I want to have a show of hands. Okay. I think it's a wonderful movie that opens eyes to the kind of corruption that takes. The movie ends with a hopeful note that maybe something we can do from inside and change the system. So how can you do the help? And it's just a little thing. You can help by spreading the word, by volunteering, by educating yourself. That's the number one thing, educate yourself. Indian citizens abroad can give money directly to the Aam Aadmi party on the website through a credit card. Non-Indian citizens can tell their friends and family in India to support, and those in Delhi to vote for AAP. Okay? My final thing would be the change you wish to see and give your support for a new.
Thank you, Abhay. Our next speaker, Mr. Pran Kurup, is also IIT Kharagpur graduate, Bay Area entrepreneur, political commentator, Economic Times, and has been closely following politics in India and writing about the anti-corruption movement, the rise of Aam, and other events. Pran is the author of 3 technical books and founder and CEO of Vitalect Incorporated, an e-learning company. He was the former president of the Silicon Valley Indian Professionals Association, SIPA, and actively involved in the alumni activities of his alma mater, IIT Kharagpur, for over a decade. We turn it over to Pran.
Can you hear me? So what I thought I'd do today is firstly talk about the current state of Indian politics very briefly, and then I will talk about what appeals to me about the Aam Aadmi Party, and then I'll end with a few comments on the middle class in India. Now, the elections are just around the corner. 2014 is around the corner. We have, middle of next year we'll have the Lok Sabha elections. And as things stand today, it looks like there are 3 possible outcomes from that election. First of all, we'll see potentially the UPA coming back, or the NDA forming the government, or a hodgepodge of regional parties coming together with the support of either the BJP or the Congress and forming the party, forming the government. Now, the interesting thing about these 3 alternatives is that if you go back over the last 2 decades, all of these 3 have had a shot at running the country. And we've seen exactly what they're capable of. And the interesting thing is that their similarities just don't end there. If you take a step back and look at it, all of them are corrupt. All of them routinely give tickets to people with criminal backgrounds. None of them have any kind of intra-party democracy whatsoever. All of them depend on black money to run their campaigns. And when it comes to bringing political parties under the ambit of RTI, all of them are united in their opposition. They don't want that to happen because they would rather run their show behind the scenes without letting it out to the public. Now, this particular sentiment that we have 3 different alternatives around the corner for us after the elections, and the fact that all of them are deeply flawed is captured very nicely in Mr. Gurucharan's book. And I'll just read a couple of lines which caught my attention, which captures the sentiment really well. He says, "The DNA of the BJP is not secular. The DNA of the Congress is status, populist, and socialist. The regional parties lack a national vision. The left parties do not believe in market-based outcomes." Now here is the important line after that. He says, "So although the last thing India needs is a new party, it's unfortunately the only alternative for a young, aspiring, secular India in the 21st century." And that really captures the future of Indian politics. And there lies, as young people who are motivated by everything that is happening in India, if we can make that happen, I think things are going to change in India and in India's political landscape forever and for good. Now, in light of this, if you look at everything that the Aam Aadmi Party stands for and everything that they've done, it's really interesting. There is plenty to like about the Aam Aadmi Party. First and foremost, the transparent funding process. Today, every single donor to the Aam Aadmi Party is listed on their website. So you can actually go there and see who donated what, right? And this has never happened in the history of Indian politics. And if someone wants to give an anonymous donation, the party will not accept it. And they've close to about 9 crores have been raised as of today, and as we speak, it's continuing to be raised, which is, I think, a phenomenal accomplishment, never before in Indian politics. Now, the other thing that they've done is also to introduce open candidate selection process. There's no mystery. I mean, today you don't know how somebody gets a BJP ticket or a Congress ticket. Well, we all know how it happens, but the reality is we don't, right? But in the case of the Aam Aadmi Party, you have it clearly outlined on the website, and it says this is the process we follow. And it opens up the playing field. Anybody could be a candidate. You could aspire to be a candidate. Whether you become the candidate or not is a different issue, but there's a clearly defined process for it. And that is a huge leap, I think, as far as Indian politics is concerned. Thirdly, for the first time in Indian politics, we have the income and expense statements of the Aam Aadmi Party actually listed on the website. Now, this is completely unheard of. You'd never see a BJP or a Congress tell you, give you their expense statements. You just know that BJP has earned about 900 crores and the Congress Party has 2,000 crores. But that's it. You don't know the details. Now, the other important thing, again, another first time in Indian politics, is that you have the Aam Aadmi Party has no high command. I mean, every single party today has some form of high command or the other. But the Aam Aadmi Party has laid the roots of intra-party democracy by going out and saying we will not have a high command. I mean, there will be decision-making process, and it will be, it won't be based on like the Gandhi family making the decisions or the RSS making the decisions, or individual head honchos of different parties making decisions. It's going to be a democratic process. Now, not surprisingly, given the way that some of the things that I've just described about the party is a natural extension of that of power. They're also talking about education and healthcare, and Abhay had alluded to the pathetic state of our schools and our healthcare centers. They made that a priority. They've gone out on a limb. They've made videos showing how poor it is and how bad it is and why it desperately needs to be improved. Now, these are things that I've mentioned with regard to the Aam Aadmi Party, and there's also a personal side to it. Now, if you think about Arvind Kejriwal and his public, clearly the public view him as somebody who's a man of very high integrity and honesty, and the government missionary has been after him for the last 3 to 4 years and have been trying to dig up dirt on him, but haven't been successful. Now, someone who's been up to that level of scrutiny, he goes out today and when he addresses public meetings, he says, please go out and vote. I don't care if you don't vote for the Aam Aadmi Party, but please go out and vote. Now, that is political leadership that I've never seen in India. You can't imagine a politician who goes out and says, I don't care if you don't vote for me or my party. But he routinely does that. That is because he wants to highlight to the people that it's just the starting point of performing your civil responsibilities, civic responsibilities rather. So once you start voting in elections as the next step, you could participate in a lot of the decision making, and there could be more of a participatory form of democracy which he has envisioned, and he has talked about at length in his book Swaraj. Now, the other thing he also does is when the party was started, and to this day, he goes around saying, we are here to change the politics of this country. Now, when he says we are here to change the politics of this country, he talks primarily about, it's not just about going and having a party, contesting elections, winning elections, replacing the existing party, and doing exactly what they're doing under a different label. That's not the intent. The intent is to change public discourse. The intent is to change how politics is conducted in the country. So he has a much broader purpose of why the Aam Aadmi Party exists. And I think it's the power of this purpose that has been so successful in energizing people who have actually come out and work for the party. You have people who are retired, who just the other day I was reading from a Facebook post where a gentleman who's retired in the UK is actually coming to work for the Aam Aadmi Party for the next 4 months. You have people who have put their jobs on hold. You have people who have put their education on hold. You have people who have put their businesses on hold to work for the Aam Aadmi Party. Clearly, the power of that purpose works. And the intent behind the party is idealistic for sure, and that also seems to have garnered a lot of support among the people. So, at the end of the day, no one is perfect, and everybody has, if I go around the room and ask people who are following politics closely, I'm pretty sure that everybody will have some pet peeve or the other to say about the Aam Aadmi Party. But at the end of the day, I think the important thing is that the leadership of the party and the party as a whole has its heart in the right place. And that is a phenomenal beginning, I think, for Indian politics. Now, there is an interesting saying in, actually it's a Chinese proverb. It says, the man who moved a mountain is the one who started by taking away the small stones. So at this point, to imagine the Aam Aadmi Party as a fourth alternative is really far-fetched, and I'm not trying to do that here. So it's about winning Delhi, being successful in Delhi, and then spreading that mission across the rest of the country. And lastly, I want to talk a little bit about the Indian middle class. Now, how many of you believe that you had a middle class upbringing while you were growing up in India? I certainly did. So you'll be able to relate to what I'm about to tell you. Interesting thing about the Indian middle class is that when it comes to complaining, we are absolutely the champions. We will sit back all day long, get together with our friends in social settings, and complain till the cows come home. We will say, the electricity bills are too high, onions are too expensive, my servant lady didn't show up, I had to pay, bribe at the police station, etc., etc. But when it comes to doing something about it, we are absolutely the last ones. We will sit back and won't want to move a finger. We'll pontificate like armchair salesmen and expect somebody else to do the job on our behalf. Now, the worst part is that on top of all of this, the middle class never bothers to go out and vote in elections. And that's the killer, because you have the politicians don't see the middle class as a vote bank. Now, here's the good news. In Arvind Kejriwal and the Aam Aadmi Party, you finally have someone who's willing to fight your battles on your behalf. And for the first time, I mean, repeatedly over the last 3 years, they have shown that they're willing to put their lives on the line, willing to put their families at risk, put their futures on the line to make this happen. And they've faced up to the most extreme harassment from the state machinery to continue this battle. And at this stage, if we don't do what it takes to make them successful, then we'll be sitting here 20 years from now with an even longer list of complaints. And at that point, you don't want to look back and say, we had this party who we could have supported and we didn't do what it takes to make them successful. So to end, I really am optimistic about the success of the Aam Aadmi Party, and I hope they are successful, because if they are, I think it will change Indian politics for good and forever. Thank you.
Thank you, Pran. Our final panelist today is Mr. Gurucharan, a well-known author, commentator, public intellectual, columnist. I mean, I could go on for hours. He's the author of The Difficulty of Being Good, the international bestseller India Unbound, which has been translated into many languages and filmed on the BBC. His other works include a novel, A Fine Family, a book of essays, The Elephant Paradigm, 3 plays consisting of Lawrence Saab, Mira, and Nine Jakku Hill. Gurucharan writes regular columns for a number of Indian newspapers, including Times of India, and guest columns for Newsweek, Wall Street Journal, Foreign Affairs. He graduated from Harvard University and was CEO of Procter & Gamble, India, before he took early retirement to become a full-time writer. He lives in Delhi and is currently visiting UC Berkeley in a very distinguished position as this year's Regents Lecturer. So let me turn it over to you, Gurucharan.
Thank you, Bob. And certainly you have provided some very inspiring reasons why we are here and why we should support the Aam Aadmi Party. And the Aam Aadmi Party, this book actually began in Tahrir Square when the democracy movement in Egypt invited me to come and present the India model for the future of Egypt. And the day after I came back from Egypt is when I met Arvind Kejriwal. And he came to my home. And I've described that in one of the chapters in this book, chapter 8, called Confronting Corruption. I think the Aam Aadmi Party, whether it succeeds or fails, has actually done a great achieved a historical purpose. And that is, it has woken up the Indian middle class that you spoke about. And it's created awareness. And this kind of thing is not going to go away. It actually began, some of you may remember, even before Arvind Kejriwal. It began in very small way, with the protest against the verdict on Jessica Lal's murder in about almost 8-9 years ago. And then it has kept building up, and the last protest was the Nirbhaya protest. So they're all in the same vein, and it is the awakening of a country. And you're absolutely right that 40% of India did not exist before 1991. So we are a young country. A third of this country, is now what would be called middle class. Now you can define middle class in many ways in terms of income and so on. But if you think of it broadly, it is a young villager who comes to a town, a tier 4 or a tier 3 town, and arrives at the railway station, and he has a cell phone, and he has the prospect of a job that he looks for. He accepts that job, and then from there he works and can see the fruit of that work. And so this group, which is today 1/3, if we go back to an 8% growth rate, which I personally think we will be about half of India by 2020. And then the politics has to change. So the Arvind Kejriwal, the Aam Aadmi movement, Anna Hazare movement, really are a preview of that movie of what India is, what has to come. The young people, I speak to a lot of young people like this, because ever since this book came out, and there's been a lot of interest, and really the timing has been related to the Anna Hazare movement. They tell me that they have no one to vote for. And I asked them why. Well, one person explained that, he said, I'm from UP. I'm from near Khurja. I'm from near Khurja. I don't know how many people know where Khurja is, but it's not too far from Delhi, about 2.5 hours away. And this fellow said, Rahul Gandhi came to our village. And Rahul Gandhi talked to us, and he said that, oh, you poor fellow, you are toiling in the sun all day, you don't have a shirt on your back, and look at you, you don't get 2 square meals to eat. And he went on and said then, look, my great-grandfather did this, and my grandfather did this, and my father did this, and so on, and how we in the Congress party are helping you with Narega and food security bill and all that. And this fellow said that Rahul Gandhi had lost it. He says, people were looking around, everybody had a shirt on their back. Everybody had a cell phone in their pocket. And they are asking, who is this fellow talking to? They were looking for aspiration, somebody who would tell them the future of their lives. And this man was treating them like a victim. And he said it's this, and then somebody else said it's the same thing with the BJP. They treat you as a victim of 1,000 years of Muslim rule. And then come the other parties, all the caste parties. They treat you as a victim of upper caste oppression. He says we are not victims. This is what the young people, I'm talking about 1/3 of India, which is going to be half. They say they're looking for the politics of aspiration. Now the question is, can Aam Aadmi, I'm going to offer some thoughts today for the Aam Aadmi party to be successful. In other words, this is, for someone like you who is close to Arvind, you can pass on these thoughts to him. The best thing that's happening today, right now, in this room, is at the root of American democracy. There was a very wise Frenchman who came to America in 1830s. His name was Alexis de Tocqueville, Frenchman. And he wrote the best book on democracy ever written, called Democracy in America. And this is the first modern democracy in the world, United States. And he says, what makes this successful? And he found the answer in neighborhood engagement. Now this is a neighborhood engagement with politics. Now you're not discussing your local councillor in Berkeley, but you are concerned with the neighborhood politics. And that's why I like the notion that the Aam Aadmi Party has not only woken up the country, but the idea that go out and vote, which is the minimum. But the second part of it is that what I say, the rallying cry in a chapter called chapter 9 of this book is, the chapter 9 is called What is to be Done. And the rallying cry is 1 hour a week. So not just vote, but spend 1 hour a week in your neighborhood. Don't just worry. That's what Tocqueville found in Americans. They called them joiners. They were joining. They had clubs, local clubs. They were singing groups, bowling leagues, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, whatever they had. But they were joiners, he called them. And they engaged in the neighborhood. And so I think that 1 hour a week, don't worry about the corruption of 2G or Suresh Kalmadi or Robert Vadra. Worry about the corruption in your neighborhood. And I think that's really a very central lesson. And what I like about what the Aam Aadmi Party has been saying is that they've been talking about the Mohalla Sabha. Now the Mohalla Sabha actually is in, the idea of the Gram Sabha is actually in the Constitution, the amendment to the Constitution for local governance. And this idea is really central to a vibrant democracy. Where I think we need a greater commitment from the Aam Aadmi Party too is to the liberal state. Frankly, in my conversations with both Anna Hazare and with Arvind Kejriwal, I found illiberal tendencies. Now, what do I mean by that? The answer to their idea, in electricity in Delhi, if you have high electricity prices and you want to bring down the cost of electricity, the answer is institutional. How do you actually create greater supply? How do you create competition between suppliers? In London, I can buy electricity from 17 different companies and they fight with each other. They're supplying me the same electricity, but they're supplying on competition. They're competing with each other, and that is improving the quality of the service. It's lowering costs. So that's what I mean, a liberal commitment is a liberal commitment to institutions. What India needs today is the reform of our institutions, the bureaucracy, the judiciary, the police, and the parliament. And so it is ultimately, we have a good constitution. We don't need a lot of amendment to the constitution. What we need is the institutions that are there a problem with this?
You can all hear.
You can hear, okay. Anyway, the point is to make a commitment to the reform of institutions. Now, we can discuss how that will be done. And you were absolutely right when you said that no matter how good you may have it in law, but unless the judiciary can work, why should it take in India 15 years to get justice in the courts? Why should it take 12 years to build a road? These are institutional failures. And the solution to these problems have to be institutional. And when you say that, then you are making a commitment to the notion of liberal politics. And so what I would like to see in the Aam Aadmi Party is a greater commitment. I mean, Lokpal is one institution, but it is one of many reforms that we need. And frankly, the Lokpal comes into play when the patient is sick, corruption has happened. What we need is, you know, if they say that if you want to clear some place of malaria, you clear the swamps. Like quinine is what you administer as a medicine after corruption has taken place. But we need to clear the swamps. And that's why we need an institutional answer to the. So it's very interesting that when this book was launched in Delhi, Arvind Kejriwal and I were on stage together. I don't know if you know that. You've seen that video? Okay. And there was Nainan who was moderating the discussion. Nainan is a very wise man. And Nainan says at the end, well, look, both of you are talking about a new party. Why don't you get together? And Arvind, being a very gentle, soft-spoken person, let me speak first. And I said, look, my problem is that I need to form a greater commitment to the liberal state. A lot of the people around Arvind Kejriwal don't even believe in the economic reforms, which includes, I'm sorry to say, your cousin, Bhushan. And to me, the starting point of India's future begins. India got its political independence in 1947, but it only got its economic independence in 1991. And so, the answer very often that comes from Prashant Bhushan is a person who believes in price control, he believes in state ownership, the state, sort of statist approach of a old-fashioned socialist. And he's a much more sophisticated person than that. But what since we are speaking, and I'm a friend, and I'm giving this thing to you as a friend. So we won't go into the very specific. I would just like to say that, spend another 3 or 4 minutes. 3 or 4 minutes, let's pull ourselves back. Before we ask ourselves, how are we going to get these reforms? Meaning bureaucracy, police, the judiciary, and the parliament. There are countless reports, and they all say the same thing. And why have these reforms not been done? And that is a very, very important question. But let me just, since we are an academic institution, and this has been chaired by Goldman, I think we should look and ask ourselves who we are as a people, as a country. Now, the rise of India in the last 2 decades has been a rise from below. It's a rise of the people, unlike China, which has risen from above, meaning the Chinese engine has been a terrific technocratic elite in China, which built this amazing infrastructure, has been at the heart of the Chinese rise. And India is almost despite the state that people rose. And that's why the book, by the way, is called India Grows at Night. I don't complete the full sentence, which is India grows at night when the government sleeps. And the purpose of the book is to really argue a case for India growing during the day. And I have a Chinese friend who made a lot of money in China. And then he forgot to share this money with the Communist Party hierarchy in that distant province where he made this money. But he was clever. He found that his life was in danger. So overnight he took out $250 million, his wealth, got it out of China, and himself also escaped from that province. Lands up in Hong Kong. And in Hong Kong, in 2 days, they found him. So he goes and buys a ticket for Vancouver. And if you arrive in Vancouver with $250 million, you get residency immediately. But in a month's time, they found him in Vancouver. And so quietly, in a car, he drove down to California. And of course, if you arrive here with that kind of money, you get a green card right away. But they found him here as well after 2 months. And now he settled, finally, he settled down in Singapore. And it is to the high level of governance of Singapore that they dare not touch him. However, he invests all his $250 million in India. And he comes to me for stock tips, but he hasn't been coming recently because he thinks I've given him bad tips. Anyway, he came one day to the house and he said, he had a backache. And I said, what's the problem? And he said, your roads. He had been in Haryana looking at factories to invest in. And he says, how could you become the second fastest country in the world with roads like these? And I explained, India grows at night. And he thought, and then he said, you mean India has risen with one hand tied? I nodded. He said, the nightmare of the Chinese leadership will be, what if that second hand got untied one day? Now, the mistake we make when we talk about the competition between China and India is who will get rich first. That's not the competition. Both countries will turn middle class. Middle class China will. But then, unless the race really is, which country will fix its government? In other words, if China has to fix its politics, India has to fix its governance. Whoever does that will win the race. Otherwise, both will get stuck in what economists call the middle income trap. And the middle income trap, China will get stuck at about $10,000. India will get stuck at $5,000, $6,000. But by 2030, both will have that kind of wealth, but they will not reach the $40,000 which they think is their right, which is the American per capita income. The other mistake we make is to believe that, 2 minutes. The other mistake we make is to believe that India's state has become weak only recently. We think it's because of coalition politics, a weak prime minister, gridlock in parliament, and so on. No, India has always been a strong society and a weak state. That's how I'm going to connect this with the Anna Hazare party now. The fact is that the Chinese has been defined by the state and the Indians have been defined by society. And the history of China is a history of empires, the history of India is a history of competing kingdoms. In China, the emperor gave the law and then he interpreted the law. In India, the king, the dharma, the law preceded the king, and the job of the king was to uphold dharma for the sake of the people. And the interpreter of the law was not the king, but the Brahmin. So very early on, in the kingdom of Magadha, we had created a liberal division of powers that weakened the state. Oppression in India never came from the state, it came from society. And the answer to that oppression was the Buddha or a guru who came around and took people. So no wonder today, no wonder India became a democracy. Indians have been accumulators, the Chinese have been assimilators. Same people from Central Asia, who came to China, they got absorbed and assimilated in one Han identity. But in India, we accumulated them into 2,200 Jatis. So therefore, India's rise is a rise from below and China's rise. A collision between a strong society and a weak state. And it's in this context that we should ask ourselves, and this is the time to really begin going to the Q&A. And so how will these reforms occur to transform India into a liberal, strong state?
We have time for some questions. I would ask only for the questioners to keep the questions kind of short and focused, not go into long speeches. Show of hands. There's a mic over there. Are you right there?
Yeah. So my question was that there are a lot of issues that are really important to India, whether they are economic, social, or political, which the Aam Aadmi Party never really issues any statement on. They don't have an opinion on anything. How am I, whenever I go back and start voting, how am I supposed to judge a party that has no opinion on important issues? Because the fact is, all these issues, development and social structures, are important.
Anyone?
So first of all, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So let me just turn that around a little bit. Have you found responses to the kind of issues that you have with the Aam Aadmi Party? Have you found answers with, let's say, one of the other parties? I mean, you have somebody like, the Congress who's been around for donkey's years, right, running the country. Do we know anything about any views about the Gandhis and what they think about anything? We don't, right? That's the nature of Indian politics. So if you look at how they have to respond to queries such as this, from a strategic point of view, when you're running a campaign and running an election, I think the average Aam Aadmi who goes out there and votes, I'm not defending this by any means. I mean, I'm just telling you the reason why you don't get answers to some of those questions is because people like you who actually ask some of these questions eventually don't go out and vote. I know that's not an excuse for not having those answers, but the reality is that if you were to look at it from a strategic election point of view, you'd rather spend your efforts going out and competing for votes of the people who would actually vote in the elections, rather than address questions like this with people who would argue forever, but not, eventually vote.
I'm going to be on his side on this one, and I'm going to really say that when a movement changes to a political party, you deserve to have a manifesto. You deserve to have a position on issues. And so I think what he's expressing is a very legitimate. By saying that others do not have satisfactory manifestos or platforms is not the answer. I do think that when you enter politics, then you should have answers. And in fact, the other difference is that the people that the Aam Aadmi is appealing to are him. And they are going to ask questions. They're not worried about caste and religion and any of those things. They will ask questions. So he deserves an answer.
No, I'm not saying he doesn't deserve an answer.
I will answer the thing. Because I was in November last year with both Arvind and Bhushan, sitting down on exactly the kind of things that are there. They have formed, and I don't know if you read the latest Tehelka article, they're incorruptible. It points out the evolution of the party, because when you first formed the party and you've been fighting anti-corruption, the answers are there. Answers are coming. They're also being promoted by the people. They have formed a group of intellectual thinkers, and they're also drawing on what Professor Gurucharan has said about the liberal the things are changing. I had many discussions with Prashant on this mutual versus the thing, because I'm an entrepreneur. I said, what are you going to do to help the entrepreneurs? Okay? And it's not, what he has as a point is that the businesses, they get a very sweetheart deal by bribing the politicians, which is true. Let me just say a couple of things about two things that you have mentioned in your book, at least one of them, the water supply. Okay? The water supply, and I've looked at the whole discussion that takes place, was a big scam. Okay? The same thing was happened, Prashant brought to my attention, I was fighting with him because at that time it was 2000, Enron. Has anybody heard of Enron? Okay. Enron went to India, bribed the politicians, got a very sweetheart deal to provide privatization of electric supply. Okay? The prices they were projecting, because there's no control and thing, would be 4 times as much. And it's important to the common person. Maybe the rich person, the budget is nothing. If your half your budget is going in electricity, then what are you going to do the money from? And the same thing they were doing there. I'm just going to complete the thing there. Okay? So what I'm saying is the answers to the question that you raised are coming, and they are being drafted. And so I don't know when you looked at it, if you can send me an email, the type of questions you have, I'll try to get the answer. So it's not that they're not concerned about it.
Yeah, but you know, I think, Abhay, the problem is they are too concerned with crony capitalism. What people want to know is how do you create rules-based capitalism? How do we change our institutions? Don't tell us this person is corrupt. They spend 90% of their time telling us who is corrupt and who is not corrupt, rather than telling us how do we reform our institutions so that entrepreneurs can succeed.
No, I 100% agree. Okay? But what I'm saying is the group is being formed.
So don't tell me about Enron. Enron is one.
No, I agree.
Tell us about the million entrepreneurs.
I'm not talking about I'm talking about there are certain things that are for privatization. There are certain things that are for public. For example, I live in the city of Palo Alto. It doesn't use PG&E. It has its own utilities and has its own water supply and own gas, own company, city of Palo Alto. My rates for electricity are half of what the person pays in PG&E. Okay? And it's all balanced and controlled by. So what you said, Gurucharan, is decentralization, giving the power to the people. If it is there, they should be involved. If the land is being taken, they should be involved. It should not be centralized top down. And that's the point. Absolutely right.
I agree with that.
Exactly. So the question, the answer, it just doesn't come in one way. I mean, who's going to decide the answer? So it does take time. That's what I'm saying.
You have a question? Where is the
Who has the mic?
Back here, then you.
Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah. I have a question. So, Aam Aadmi Party was formed to get Jan Lokpal bill, and Arvind Kejriwal, he's promoting this idea that if we get Jan Lokpal bill, we'll reduce our corruption from 60% to up to 90% now, and that will solve almost all of the problems. But this Jan Lokpal bill is supposed to be a central government legislation, and Aam Aadmi Party is right now going for Delhi election. And how is it possible to get to the passing of Jan Lokpal bill sooner and than just winning the whole India election, because none of the parties they're going to support Arvind to get a Jan Lokpal bill, as we have already seen. Is there a way in between, or is there a way in which Supreme Court or any other institution in India can help, or an UN recommendation or something like that? So there was some talks about that as well. So my question is entirely on the idea of Aam Aadmi Party. How can we get Jan Lokpal bill sooner than winning all India election and having absolute majority? Thank you.
I can take one crack and Pran gives it. One of the things about Jan Lokpal is one is the parliament, the other is the state, Lok Yukta, okay, which is the thing you can look at state. So the Lokpal is, they tried very best with the agitation and things, the prime with the fasting, the Gandhian method, the prime minister wrote a letter saying, hey, we're going to pass it, but they never did, okay? And not with any teeth, they had kind of just the same thing, business as usual. The question is, that's the reason why Aam Aadmi Party was started. But the Lokpal was only one of the things that is there. The good governance, which Professor Gurucharan alluded to, is vital. putting the right system, changing the system so they work. And decentralizing things, which also what you do with grants of land, that's how this is what we're starting. And so I'm very hopeful. I mean, I have these rigorous discussions because I am for, I won't call pro-business, I am for pro-entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship, people creating wealth from there. It's not just some, what is called, crony capitalism or things. And I agree with Professor Gurucharan. Go ahead.
See, I think if they are successful, the Aam Aadmi Party is successful in Delhi, then they can implement Lokayukta at the state level. And so you're right about the fact that Lokpal at the center would take a lot more than that. So the hope is that if they're able to do it successfully in Delhi, then there'll be enough of public momentum to say, let's do it, and there potentially be pressure from the people for other parties to help as well to make it happen at the national level. But to start with, when he talks about Lokpal now, it's more to do with Lokayukta for the state of Delhi.
Question here.
So, hello. Yeah. The politics in India is very sensitive along religious lines, and we saw that recently what happened in Muzaffarnagar, and there were riots, over 20-30 people got killed, and political parties were involved, and AAP released a statement very initially, and it turned out that there were some inaccuracies and whatnot. And I mean, I support AAP wholeheartedly. I have donated hundreds of dollars by now on that already, and I'm still going to do that. But what I took issue is that they released a statement, and probably that was wrong. So they deleted the statement from the website. And that was very childish. You should probably provide an addendum saying, okay, this was wrong. It was prima facie statement, and we should not do that, and probably present an addendum to that. It's very childish to remove a statement like that. And it seems that some people are raising questions maybe to spite against BJP or something. So I would like AAP to be very clear on this religious sentiment. I don't want them to support any one of them over the other. But I mean, you got the gist of my question.
Response to that. Communal issue.
One particular thing I'll just say. Absolutely. I also go to the website and I see what the ardent BJP supporters write. Okay, they say it is a B team for the Congress. And the ardent Congress supporters say that Aam Aadmi Party is a B team for BJP to defeat the Congress. The question that is there, what you said about the religious politics, Muzaffarnagar, the big riots and things, this is precisely what Aam Aadmi is trying to get away from, the politics divide and rule that I mentioned earlier in my remarks. And unless you take the principled stance that India is a secular democracy, and make no mistake about it, it's not a communal, it's not, if we want India to be Hindu Pakistan, okay, a Hindu republic like an Islamist Republic of Pakistan, then I think BJP is the answer, okay? Throw all of what Pakistan did, threw all the Hindus out, through the kind of riots and things that happen and happening in a number of places because people are afraid. But it's not, and Congress on the other hand, that's divided by saying, we are the only person who will protect you minorities. They play one against the other. We need a new kind of
got my question wrong, sorry.
Sorry.
He asked a different question.
In response to your removing the
I don't know much about that.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah,
we can give the feedback to them.
Yeah, my question is just that they should better be clear about what they want to do, whatever it is. I mean, they can always support their things, and I support.
I think you should give them the feedback. He's got a good point.
Okay. So since the young woman there had a question.
Well, I'm not aware of that, so I'll.
And you. We'll take 4 more questions. Yeah, to the young woman there.
Hello.
Make them short.
Hi. So Mr. Gurucharan had mentioned Tocqueville's writing on America in the 1860s and this notion of joiners making neighborhoods safer. So one of the things you didn't mention though is that those neighborhoods that he was writing about, their safety was enabled by having both black slaves and having, eliminated Native Americans before that. And continues to be the case today that neighborhoods become safe for some only by becoming unsafe for others. And whereas in the United States that may be demonstrated by racial profiling sort of happening alongside gentrification, in India that occurs through processes like slum clearance and excessive policing and displacement of, for example, in Chennai, the beachside fishing communities who are being displaced for the sake of the new flyover construction, etc., as well as communities that have historically been detested and despised by the middle class, including beggars, various communities labeled as vagrants, like Hijras and scheduled tribes. What are the options that the Aam Aadmi Party could offer to people who will not fit, even if they ever might in income, the ethos and the kinds of identity that go with being a middle class person?
Well, I think that you've raised a profound question. Mine was a very modest attempt to talk about neighborhood engagement. In other words, that we have an awakening in India. A new middle class has come up. And now the job of this middle class is to engage with politics. And the process has begun with the Aam Aadmi Party. And so this is a good opportunity for us to start the process of, because neighborhood engagement was not part of the European ethos, nor was it a part of the Asian. Almost no Asian country had that. And I think that so whether it was founded on black slavery or white or killing of the American Indians, I think is of very little consequence for this purposes of art. We are taking inspiration from an idea, and that idea is of neighborhood engagement.
We have to end by about 5:30. We have a question. We'll take one question here, 2 and 3 there. 4 more questions, but quickly, please.
Before I get to the question, I had a few clarifications about the questions that were raised, because I myself have worked for the India Against Corruption movement before I came here, and many of my friends have gone back to support for it, and I'm tied down with the student loans and stuff. So as far as the election manifesto thing that somebody raised in the back, one important thing that comes to my mind is the book Swaraj that Mr. Arvind Kejriwal has written is excellent manifesto for the party. One example that I'd like to give from the book is that he talks about this area, which is a slum area in Delhi, which didn't have water supply, which didn't have, real electricity and things like that. And when the government, provided funds for that, it came under a particular scheme like Narega and, the Jawaharlal Nehru Urban Renewal Mission and things like that. So when the money comes from that, like the centralized manifesto which comes down. So for that area, there were a lot of fountains that were created, as part of the, the process that came through from there. But they didn't have water in the first place to get those fountains ready. So what he says in the book is that every particular area has a different type of a scenario set up. So you cannot have a centralized manifesto on most of the topics that that we face on an everyday basis.
Get to your question?
Sure. So the next question I had to ask is that as far as Delhi elections are concerned, we've seen how 10,000 volunteers or more than that are going on the voluntary basis and getting the word across. But do you think with less money, people they've come to such an extent in India that if you don't make the right kind of noise, they don't really pay attention to the political party. Like you have a big Rath Yatra by the BJP and then people take notice of something's happening. So with that money constraint, people have been joining in for Delhi, but what is your opinion about the rest of India? Of course, time will be the best answer, but when it comes to the whole of India in the Lok Sabha elections, with that money constraint, with the media being gagged by the central government, without having that kind of a reach, what kind of tactics that they're using for Delhi, do you think they would be sufficient enough, and what is your take on it? That was my question.
The real test is in Delhi. So the proof of concept is really in Delhi. So they have, so many volunteers going out and making it happen. Then there's no reason why the same thing will not work in the rest of the country, because you just have to expand that in a big way. And there are constant, requests about why is that you're not starting in other parts of the country. And they've already started in Karnataka, so it will spread that.
In the back there, I'll just answer one more question.
Yeah.
The basic tenet of the strategy is awaken Indians. Like today they have over 100,000 volunteers, unpaid, going door to door and convincing people. You know how much it costs BJP and Congress for those 100,000 volunteers? Even if they pay $1,000 or $2,000 each volunteer paid, because all they can get is paid people. Okay, that's $200 million or more. Okay, so and the passion that the people bring, who are unpaid volunteers, their own passion is worth a lot, and that is what it's like a wave that goes. Okay, so it may be a tsunami. Who knows?
Accept the question there in the far back.
Yes, sorry. So one thing there were two main issues which were brought up. So one was that of corruption, and the second was that of the economic policy of Aam Aadmi Party. And I heard only 30 seconds worth of conversation about that from Mr. Gurucharan Das. So my question is to Mr. Gurucharan Das is that since the Aam Aadmi Party does not have as cohesive a message on the economy as they have on anti-corruption or other governance issues, what is your opinion, what is your take on the economic policy of Aam Aadmi Party, and whether I should be cynical about the Aam Aadmi Party if I want India's economy?
The national parties, we are connected to the regional parties. So, and we don't know, we can't look up to any leaders in our own constituency. So that's when the middle class people, we're just wondering whom to vote against. And that's when we stay away from the elections and we just see what is going on. So what is the answer from you, and what is that we can do to be a part of the change?
Well, I think that's what these people have been really talking about. That one is the fact that you are here today is a very important first step. That means you want to engage. And secondly, when the elections come, you have to vote. I mean, you have to vote for the least worst candidate. Okay. And third, 1 hour a week. I mean, 1 hour a week in your neighborhood. And that's really, we're getting on.
On that encouraging note, please join me in thanking the panelists.
Yeah, I just want to end with a comment that long time back, Theodore Roosevelt, the 26th President of the United States, talked about the man in the arena. I admire and salute Arvind Kejriwal and his team for jumping in the arena. This was indeed a stimulating discussion. I hope you got what you were hoping for and more. And I hope you will jump in the arena. And like Mahatma Gandhi said, be the change you wish to see in the world. Thank you, Bob, Gurucharan, Pran, and Abhay. Let's give them another round of applause. This concludes the panel discussion portion of the program. Those who have purchased Gurucharan Das's book may come here and get the book signed. Those who have wished to purchase, there are still some books outside. You may purchase them and get them signed. Thank you and good evening. Take a picture.